We'd like to call our meeting to order, and we'll start with the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening. I'll have the clerk please call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Trustee Petrucci? Here. Trustee Harper?
Here.
Trustee Germain?
Here.
Trustee Kalani?
Here.
Treasurer Harney?
Here.
Clerk Hopkins here. Supervisor Fountain?
Here.
We have quorum of the board. We also have present Township Manager James Wickman.
Thank you. Item number 4 is approval of our meeting agenda.
So moved.
Support. Motion by Treasurer Horning, second by Trustee Harper. Any discussion? Being none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Item number 5, call to the public. Good evening, Mr. Corneo.
Good evening. Gary Corneo, 2558. Who takes notes now? I'm just curious.
Computer.
Oh, very good. Okay. I just came, perhaps this will be a surprise to you. I know it doesn't happen often at public meetings, but I came to say thank you to the board members for the work that's been done in the village on behalf of my wife and myself for the sidewalks. Feel very gratified and happy that that work has been done and people started walking on them even before they were quite done. And I believe that, you know, as winter approaches, it certainly increases the safety of young children, especially walking by our building along Krause, and shows to our young people what is important in the community, which I think is a responsibility that all of us have. So I just wanted to come tonight to say thank you and keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Anybody else this evening to call to the public? Being that, we'll move to item number 6, approval of our consent agenda.
So moved. Support.
Motion by Trustee Kalani, second by Trustee Germain. Any discussion? Being none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Item number 7 is presentation, Economic Development Council of Livingston County, Spark presentation. Good evening. If you guys want to sit at the table if you'd like, sure. That'd be fine.
Well, good evening. I'm Scott Griffith, the chair of the Livingston County Economic Council, and with me tonight is Phil Santer, who is our Ann Arbor Spark representative responsible for Livingston County, and does a great job. And what I'd like to do, if it's possible, is to sort of start out with an introduction. I know most of you know this, but for anybody who doesn't, and just as a reminder, it's been about 2.5 years since the last time we were here. And if you remember, we entered into a contract with the different townships, including yourselves, to support the economic development, the economic work here in the Livingston County. And just to back up a minute, if you remember, the history is we used to try to do this all ourselves, and we had a actually very dynamic Livingston County Economic Development Corporation. But the problem was the world's getting smaller and bigger at the same time, and we were finding ourselves to be kind of lost in the fray, and regional economic development has become the way of the world as more and more corporations from throughout the world end up looking for locations which include our backyard. And it's very difficult to be a player in that world just as an independent small county in our case. So we enlisted the association and regionalized our economic development work with Ann Arbor Spark about 3 years ago, excuse me, with the support of you all and the county and many businesses. So our corporation in Livingston County now is basically a council which collects the money and then signs a contract to work in this regionalized corporate economic corporation structure. It's gone particularly well, we believe. It's been 3 really good years, this being the 3rd year. Phil's going to go over some of the things that have gone on. We continue to keep our identity in Livingston County to the extent that we keep the council so we can guide economic development process and have some accountability from our regionalized responsibility with Ann Arbor Spark. But they really know what they're doing, and they do a fine job, and so we're very, very pleased. Kind of really with that, I'm going to turn it over to Phil to talk to you about what successes we have to talk about and what we've done and where we're going. This industry is a lot like all real estate, a little bit when people are doing site searches, and it's a long, protracted process. And we're, like I say, in our 3rd year of this relationship, and we're starting to see the fruits of labor. It takes a little time, though. So with that, Phil, I'll let you take over here.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Do you want me to?
Yeah, sure. I'll do this. So we're a 501c3, which allows for corporations primarily to make donations to us in a tax-exempt way, to take the deduction. One of the more interesting things is our budget works out to $2.22 per resident. We have anecdotal information that shows that many regions this number exceeds $10 to even sometimes $40 a resident. We are very lucky to do it in such an efficient pattern. If you remember, our model back when we met was to try to finance this with 2/3 public funding and about 1/3 private. The private has finally really started to come on in the last year. We're getting really close to these ratios. To be honest, to start out with, they're about 20% private and the rest is public. We're now finally catching up. Part of it is a group of us that can go out and ask everyone, and the other side of it is the private side having the money to give, and we're getting there. So people are looking very good. We get tremendous support right now from the private side, which is really cool. Okay, now Phil will talk to you.
So this is just an overview of the board of directors, just to give you a sense of who's on there, and I think you'll see a pretty good mix of. And by the way, good evening, everyone. My name is Phil Sancher. Before I get started into that, and this is the board that meets. You'll see on there representatives from the local universities, from local municipalities, private sector, etc. Just to give you a sense of who's on the board.
We do thank you very much for your participation. If you remember, we divided our county into kind of regions, and you have been a very active participant in our regional group that represents the U.S. 23 group, and we thank you very much for that.
So this is just kind of an overview of, obviously, the territory that we're talking about here. And I think from a perspective of economic development moving forward, the model that we've sort of employed in Livingston County really is I think, sort of leading the edge in terms of how economic development efforts are going to go on in the future. In fact, last week we were asked to present at the statewide Economic Developers Association conference about the partnership between Spark and Livingston County as potentially a model for how other regions can do economic development effectively at a regional level. So we hope to be sort of, I guess, a thought leader in moving that forward. So we've had the, I guess, good fortune of working on a lot of the larger economic development projects that have gone on in Livingston County over the past few months, and these are just a couple of the companies that we've worked directly with. I think, in particular, I think one of the largest that we've seen sort of recently in the county and in the region has been the location of Lake Trust Credit Union into Brighton Township, and I think this is really just kind of a case study of how we can try and do regional economic development effectively and creating the relationships and the partnerships that you have between a local or between a company and also between the municipal partners. This is just a quote from the President and CEO, David Snodgrass, in terms of making that decision and sort of what was important to them through that process. So we measure a lot of things in the work that we do, and this is just a sample of some of those items. We'll talk a little bit more in depth, but we provide quarterly reports to you and to the board of directors that show these, among other things. And obviously, investment and new job commitments are extremely important, but I think what I would probably underscore there is the unique referrals. These are really connections that we try and make with local businesses that they wouldn't have otherwise known about, that are going to help them do sort of a variety of things. It could be all the way from connecting them with local Michigan work so that they can get some on-the-job training funds so they can hire new employees, or it could be connecting them to sales opportunity through Pure Michigan Business Connect, which is the state's B2B marketplace for companies to try and increase their Michigan sales. So there's a lot of different things that kind of go into that, and I think that's where you see a lot of the strong relationships that you can have between an economic development organization and local businesses. So this is just kind of a high level of what we try and do. I think at the end of the day, what we're trying to provide is really the most professional economic development service that we can for the region. And this is just kind of a couple highlights of how we actually do that. So one of the areas that was important to the board when we first started doing this work was providing Livingston County that access into state level, national level, international level work. And it's sort of interesting, I guess anecdotally, how those things kind of all come together. I think I remember one of the first things we were doing outside of the region is we had gone to a conference for biotech firms in Boston, and I was chatting with a woman that was she was from Cambridge, Massachusetts, and she had never been to Michigan except one time, and that was to participate in the Factory 5 school, which is at the MTech in Howell, and that was her only experience of Michigan. So it's sort of this small world element. You realize that once you get out to the other areas, how small the world actually is. Going back, sorry. Increase international and regional connections for local firms. I want to highlight this one a little bit further, but one of the areas is that some of the work that we do in terms of getting into these, I guess, regional or national or international networks is providing access to companies in the area with some of that benefit as well. So an example of that would be CRW Plastics down the street. We were able to arrange a tour of 25 Chinese business owners that came into the area, not directly as a business development opportunity, but as a way for them to be able to see how a foreign firm, because they're headquartered in Brazil, how they're actually operating within Livingston County and within Michigan, and provide them with a little bit of information on how to do that effectively. So it was a nice sort of interesting and unique experience. And then another piece of this is the Proactive Retention Call program. And I think we could probably spend an entire presentation just talking about this element alone, but the idea that we try and actively engage with the companies that are in this region to see where they're at in their development cycle, and then see if there are resources available to us that we know of as economic developers, and then connect them to those resources. I think that's extremely and it's vitally important to regional economic development, and something that is a really core element of our programs. So just kind of rounding out this, community-based project management is the phrase, I think, of really identifying growth opportunities for a region, and then assigning someone, us usually, to tackle that and make sure that either barriers are reduced, or access to resources could be made. So, for example, Eberspacher in Brighton, what that ultimately ended up being was trying to ensure that they were connected to the folks at the state level in order to understand that South Carolina is a significant opportunity for that company, and that they needed to really kind of step up to the plate in order to get that project done. It could also mean visiting the location. So, for example, when we had an out-of-state firm, we were able to travel down to the company and meet with those folks, and I think maybe do a little bit of due diligence on the community's behalf in order to make sure that, hey, the company knew we were willing to do what it took in order to get them here and welcome them, and also ensure that we had a little bit of understanding and, like I said, due diligence on the community's behalf to see kind of who these people were. Economic development consulting, I think a core element of this is the relationships that I think we have with our municipal partners, with James and with David and with others on the township staff of saying, okay, here are things that are going on in our realm as economic developers that we want to make sure that you guys are aware of, and then as appropriate or as the community may be interested to try and connect them to those resources. So benchmarking, for example, for development processes through the state's Redevelopment Ready Community Program, or talking through different options that you may have when you are holding on to land, for example, those types of things. Increased transparency in reporting, I think, is vitally important so that you guys are getting consistent updates in terms of what we are working on and where those metrics are. And then also representation for regional efforts. So Scott mentioned that the state is regionalizing, especially from an economic development perspective, and we're sort of the local point organization for the economic development piece of that, and trying to provide updates on opportunities for things that are going on. So you may have heard that this region was selected for something called Investing in Manufacturing Communities Partnership, which was this federal level grant designation. So being the point organization for ensuring that Livingston County is aware of opportunities that could create. So I wanted to provide a case study kind of going back to the retention call program, and I wanted to provide you a little information in terms of some folks that are in your backyard. And this is Copert Biological System, which you are probably familiar with. But I think what's exciting about this is I think it really represents the type of relationship that we can try and develop with local firms. So we had first met them, and it's definitely one of the more interesting retention visits that you get to do, because obviously they produce bees, which not every company produces bees. So it's pretty interesting experience to go in and see bee production. And it's one of these things where you get to go as an economic developer and say, this is really cool stuff that's happening in your own backyard. So that relationship began, and James was able to take the tour with us, which I think he had done before, but go through it and make those introductions and, again, see where they were at in their development process. And I think we emerged out of that as a potential for them to potentially be expanding in the area. And we followed that up, and ultimately they are actually able to do the expansion without expanding the physical area of their building. They were able to create some efficiencies in-house. But as a result of that relationship, we've been able to make a connection to them to have the Lieutenant Governor visit their headquarters in the Netherlands along with the Department of Agricultural's director. And I think that's important I think it's important for two reasons. A, I think it gives them a connection to the state level that they may not have otherwise had, but I think more importantly, it opens up the eyes to state level leadership that there's some interesting things going on, and potentially connect them later on to other companies, because Copert, for doing quite a bit of sales, actually has very few within Michigan. So one of the opportunities we feel is that they can try and connect further with companies in the state. And part of that, we've also been able to connect them to something called the Pure Michigan Business Connect. There was an agricultural summit that took place that they were able to participate in. So basically got them in the same room as a number of potential customers of their product. So that's a great opportunity. And I think even most recently, what's been interesting, I don't know how much I could talk about it, but they had kind of a research and development opportunity, and we were able to connect them with an intern that came in this summer from the engineering school at the University of Michigan to work on a project specifically with them. And the feedback I've gotten so far from the company is that that's been a pretty successful partnership, and they've been doing some cool things. So I hope we can tell you a little bit more about that. I just don't want to obviously share more than I should. So I guess that's the end of my piece. Back to Scott.
Well, just that, I guess you can see that we have very professional staff, which is wonderful. Phil is an unbelievably trained, well-trained professional, does a great job. But beyond that, he actually has more people with him who have been working with us. So unlike previously where we were kind of a one-man do-it-all shop, just because that's what we can afford, we are now at a stage that we have multiple levels of staff that help us both on retention, the development calls, the ability to present a professional image, contact with the state. It's all because of the relationship that you've helped us be able to foster in supporting us, you know. We're now going into a new cycle with our relationship with Ann Arbor Spark. We are going to sign another 3-year extension because this has been so successful. Just so you know, the contract has been fixed for 3 years, which is good for all of us, but it's hard to keep people fixed forever. So it's going to be increased by 3% a year for the next 3 years. So we ask that you be willing to consider that kind of relationship and at the same level based upon the assessment goals of yours, 3% increase each year also. So with that, it's probably a good time for questions. We'll start talking about
Board members have any questions?
What does the economic outlook look like for Livingston County over the next 3 years?
So one of the nice things that we were able to connect with on about, it's probably been maybe more than 12 months now, is doing an economic outlet specifically for not Region 9 that we talked about, but another region that included Oakland County. And actually out of, I think it was Oakland County, Lapeer, Shiawassee, Genesee, Livingston, and Macomb. Lapeer and Livingston County were scheduled to be two of the strongest and actually have all of the jobs that were lost during the recession come back by the end of 2015. So that's the projection, is that things should be moving back quickly specifically for Livingston County. So I think it's pretty strong. I think the recovery, at least from our perspective, probably hasn't been as robust as people wanted, but from at least from the studies that have been done, and that was done from some folks at the University of Michigan that do that often, at least Livingston County is poised to do well going forward.
We recently completed a residential market analysis that's looking at, what the type of housing that we can sustain in our community and the number of units that we might be looking at in terms of different lifestyles of homes. What does Ann Arbor Spark and the economic development, I mean, sometimes it's all about businesses, but it's also a location where people come to live.
Right.
And I guess what I'm curious about, are there any other communities who are being proactive in looking at what they should be doing in their community in terms of housing, and how does that fit in with what you guys are doing?
So admittedly, economic development, I think if you go back in terms of the history of this as an industry, it really started as industrial development, and it's sort of played less of a role. And I think as we sort of merged and moved forward, and we're now we all have to wear multiple hats, so to speak. And I think to the point on the residential side of things, there's been a sort of this emergence over the past few years of talking about, there's this phrase called placemaking, essentially, of trying to ensure a sense of place. And in my mind, that speaks directly to the question of the residential piece. And I guess my thought with an economic development hat on is really a diversity of options for folks. I don't think there's a silver bullet. I think oftentimes when folks are talking about placemaking, that just means, loft-style apartments in a downtown area. And I think the reality is that in order to attract companies, you have to have a diversity of options, because not all of the workforce is going to be able to afford or want to live in that type of opportunity or that type of facility. So I guess from my perspective, it would really be trying to ensure that you have diversity of options within a community so that you can have multiple opportunities moving forward.
to the extent that there has to be a strategic aspect to this. I mean, we could be a community that lives totally off the commuter, but we've chosen over time to create an economic development arm and to try to bring jobs locally, because between supporting people who do live here and the whole concept of placemaking, we need jobs in the community, and that's where really the whole concept of the EDC works. If you've noticed in its charts, they've done a particularly good job. I am enough of a realist to realize that even though in 3 years that was a remarkable angle of attack, that it's either going to level off or go up and down as we have successes, because when you have things in the hopper and they come to fruition, you quit counting them, and next thing you know is how fast can you backfill. Or when you get one company that hires 200 people, that makes a huge bump in your scale. But as long as it's going up, we're creating jobs in the community. We're sort of like supporting those people who drive out, and hopefully creating more opportunities for people not to have to drive out. If you remember, our demographic for our county is just a huge two-income family. be nice to think at least one of those could still be here all the time working, So hopefully.
Has Ann Arbor Spark worked with any of the school districts in terms of perhaps explaining what the jobs out there today is really one about having the younger folks really be either educated in the right, getting the education in the right direction here, and training our workforce. And it'd be nice to know what's going on with the educational establishment in and around Livingston County.
So that the element that you bring there is probably more core right now and more, I guess, hotly debated than maybe any other in economic development right now, is sort of this talent question. And it has to be, I think, really businesses coming to the table at the same time as educators are coming to the table. And I think when that's been done in the past, they've really talked past each other. One of the things that we've tried to do is in December we worked with LESA to do a talent tour. So we basically took a number of companies, mostly in the manufacturing space, and said, listen, here, and showed them physically, here are the assets that are available within the high schools around the area, and this is the type of curriculum that's being worked on. But I really think there needs to be more proactive activity between the two, and it has to be from the educator saying, yeah, we want to talk to the business community, and the business community saying that they want to do the same thing. I think we've seen some good examples of this. So the Pinckney Robotics Program, for example, is sort of has received national attention for how good those students are, and that has been a nice connection between like TG Fluids, which has taken on a couple of those folks as interns, to kind of give them information of this is what we need as an employer and these are the kinds of skills that we want. But there really needs, in my opinion, there needs to be more proactive and deliberate discussions between those two entities. There has to be.
Well, I like to hear that because I like to say, what kids only know what their parents do. If you grow up in a family where one's a teacher or one's a doctor or one's an engineer, that's what the kids are generally exposed to. That's what they know. And what I'm seeing, what I have a real problem with is the schools and business community really not merging enough to allow students or for students to have job shadowing or something like that, so they see what kinds of different professions that are out there. And that to me is probably the biggest economic development, one of the biggest economic development drivers that needs to be looked at, is how do we get kids interested. I don't know how many kids I talk to, because my son just graduated, who want to study physical therapy. Well, there can only be so many physical therapists in this world. Maybe they're counting on all those baby boomers needing physical therapy. But my point is that I really find it troubling that some of these young folk don't know about what job opportunities are out there, what kinds of professions there are. And I just see this as a gap between economic development, business community, and schools.
So I could talk probably for a long time on that point, but I think you're absolutely right in terms of there's a cultural perception, I think, especially away from, if you go out and talk to manufacturers, and they're like, listen, we can't find the pipeline right now of folks. And it's sort of a little bit, who do you put the blame on in terms of, okay, you as an employer, if you don't have the supply, do you increase the wage in order to see if that happens? And nationally, at least the data indicates is that wages have not been increased in order to affect, even though there is this perceived gap in the talent pool. So that's one element. And the other side, I can see students and I can see families trying to say, listen, manufacturing has historically been extremely cyclical, and you need to recognize, and people have gotten burned on that in the past. So there's sort of there's a little bit of pros and cons to both, but really the community that, and I think this is said nationally, the community can sort of figure out this talent question of being able to provide a direct pipeline of folks that are needed kind of on an instance notice, is going to be the one that sort of wins the economic development game. And I think, frankly, no one's really figured that out effectively just yet throughout the country. I think that's what we're all really trying to focus on.
Phil, if I made you come up with one. What would you say is a barrier that you run into within Livingston County of getting people to?
So we did actually some analysis of the projects that we sort of lost as over the past, I think it was over the past 12 months or maybe it was 18 months. And I think it was 33% or so was lost because of lack of real estate options, to be honest. So from a perspective of the pipeline that we see oftentimes will be, like I said, in sort of the industrial space, where they'll have an industrial classification. And to the extent that we have that available in Livingston County, the vacancy rate is actually under 10% for industrial properties in Livingston County. So the reality is that we're not always getting swings at the bat because we don't always have either the land type available or the type of existing real estate product in order to do that. So I think going forward, and one of the things that we need to think about is not only the talent question, which is huge, but also land use planning. And can we try and create options where there could be opportunities for more sort of job creating projects to come in as a result of that. So just in terms of the analysis, it would be lack of real estate options.
So is that segment of the market, I mean, like Trustee Kalini said, we did a market analysis and we've spent, time on the residential side. And we all know what happened with property values and how people picked up land, and now that land has been consumed, and now you're starting to see people move towards putting in new developments. As far as from your end, the industrial, I mean, are those people still looking for existing buildings, or are they starting to put money into building on raw land?
So surprisingly enough, there had been really no new developments on the industrial side of things for a long time, and it's just now that we're going to start seeing new industrial development happening. So I mentioned the Eberspacher project is one. That's going to actually triple the size of their facility within the city of Brighton. So that's going to be new that you're going to see. And amazingly enough, there's actually something before the city of Howell right now for a speculative industrial building of around 95,000 square feet, which is the first that I'm aware of in Southeast Michigan where there's going to be some spec industrial sort of on the way. So I think we're finally seeing that. I think there was a lot of and Scott's the real estate broker, so he can tell you more. But I think there's been a little bit of hesitancy to try and actually do some new industrial build, and it's finally gotten to the point where people are saying, okay, yeah, let's do some new building because we just have to.
Some of the bigger projects that have come through on site searches, we don't have buildings their size in Livingston County. So some of the biggest opportunities for employment, we don't even have the buildings, or maybe there's a handful, but they're owned by the people who are still operating because they're so big. So it's an interesting transition that we need to go through. And the biggest issue with just going out and saying, well, then we'll just go create more industrial land is it doesn't work that way because you have to have the infrastructure, the roads, the sewer, the water. And these last 5 years have been tough, and everybody's kind of capped at the edge of where nobody's been extending anything because they didn't have money to extend anything. They were just trying to get back what they already put out. So it's an interesting time when it feels like it's been a slow start, but it's still ahead of us. We need to catch up somehow.
Do you see, from your viewpoint, with the economy recovering slightly, that Hartland Township is poised to grow on the retail side, as we have all these properties here ready for move-in, short of putting up the structure itself? Do you think that's something that's going to come back in the future soon?
Yeah, so I guess from the theoretical perspective, it's that when you have increase in some of the industrial work, then you're going to have to see other growth in other sectors of the economy, and so I think it has to be the case. I think that Hartland's poised and has been poised for this type of growth that you guys have seen, and they're going to continue seeing. So with the expectation that there's going to be the jobs back in the economy, those people are going to have to shop somewhere, they're going to have to buy things. It only makes sense that that's going to follow.
It's interesting when you look at how much how far we dropped on the employment side of the world. and so much of our employment back during the peak was generated by what I'd call the housing boom or the new construction boom, and that hasn't really yet come back, and in fact, it's still got barriers because of costs and so forth, and yet the numbers are coming up to the employment levels that they were previous. That means other areas are filling up that employment, which is fascinating because, should there ever now be another housing boom or at least more construction go on, that adds on top. It becomes icing that part of the core.
I know you're requesting a 3-year extension contract from Hartland Township at an average of about $12,700 per year over a 3-year period. And I'm in support of that. I think Hartland Township has been strongly supportive in the past and will be so in the future, at least from my point of view. My question is, though, what type of participation do you have from other townships or cities within Livingston County? Are we unique or are we normal?
Well, what we have found is the southeastern, 66% or almost 70% support us the way we request and so forth. Peripheral townships, by that I mean the most westerly and most northerly, have had challenges supporting us because they have a harder time seeing where the economic benefits are because they don't have the density of population and so forth, is my speculation. But so when you look at our map up here, the majority of our municipalities, the majority of our townships, but when you get around the fringes on the edges, we haven't had the same kind of support. It's just, they just haven't come through. Probably the real exception in the whole there would be Howell Township, which was in particular buried by a group of assessments who didn't have any money to spend on anything, and they just said, no to everything. We should probably help them try to get out of that.
Good.
Any other questions? Comments? Well, thank you so much for the update. We appreciate that, and congratulations on a successful 3 years, and we hope to have this discussion soon, and hopefully have another 3 to go.
Again, we thank you very much for all your support so far.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 8A is Ore Valley Drive paving contract. If you recall, the Ore Valley folks put a petition in to repave their road several months ago. The bids are in. Are we going to have Bob West give a report on this?
Whatever pleases the board, he's certainly available to answer questions.
Yeah, Bob, why don't you come forward, and if any of the board members have any questions, you have your report is here.
We've certainly talked about it, came in under the engineer's estimate. We had competitive bids put in. We're ready to offer the motion for your consideration, but can answer any questions you might have.
Not that it's a big deal, but in the packet,
The bid tab is mislabeled.
8B, it says Village Sidewalk Bid Tabs.
Yeah, I apologize for that. We had essentially 6 packets were picked up for the bids, and 5 of those were returned. Only one contractor was unresponsive. They ranged from $142,729, which was the lowest bidder, up to $179,200. So the recommendation would be to move forward with Nagel Paving of Novi, Michigan, and the low bidder in the amount of $142,729.
I'll move to authorize the supervisor and clerk to execute a contract with Nagel Paving Company for the Ore Valley Drive Paving, SAD, in an amount of $142,729.
Support. Motion by Trustee Kalani, second by Trustee Harper. Is there a timeline on here where we're anticipating to start the project?
I'm not sure if I included the timeline. I believe it may have been in the operational report, but they're looking to start October and wind down first or second week of November, pending weather.
They're going to try to get it done this year.
Yes, they're still looking to get it done this year, for sure. We won't make it in time for the tax roll as far as confirming the roll, because that has to be due, I believe, by September, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, we've already confirmed the role
Or,
and set it up, but
I'm sorry, the readjustment.
Yeah, if there's a
Adjustments.
savings, a significant savings, we'll lower the assessment.
next year.
Yeah, next year.
Okay. Any other questions or discussion?
I do have a question, and I've lost where I read what I read, but what I remember reading was that the engineering fee was to be, what's the word I'm looking for? It was going to be estimated once we developed a more defined scope of work. Was that already done in order to get these bids?
Yes, that was the original bid specs and the bid packages that were available for these contractors. That was all incorporated into that.
Okay, so we're awarding the contract to the paver, but in terms of the engineering cost and this cost, we're still within the original?
Yes, and there actually is some on-site construction, sorry, I'm at a loss for words. Inspections, thank you. We'll have an HRC representative out there inspecting this, so those fees are included in this.
Hubbard Roth and Clark's fees are included in this total bid.
Just for the actual construction inspection, not for the bid specs themselves. But we are still under budget by everything that was proposed originally.
James, can you pull up the map of the road for me for my next question? My next question is, what is 0 Dunham? That's one of the addresses that's given for...
Vacant piece of land.
Yeah, essentially, if it has a 0, it means that there's
Doesn't
no
have an
address
address.
assigned to it at this point in time.
But it's not on Dunham Road, or it is? I'm trying to understand how they are being excessive. It's,
Not on this map?
It would have been the, let's see, the
yes, that was the right map.
northeast corner. And essentially, yes, they do have Dunham Road access as well, but the legal description of that parcel indicates that they do have rights, and therefore they were included in this.
So it's
To Ore Valley
It's
Drive.
that U-shaped parcel.
Yes, essentially.
Okay.
Bob, was the crown issue / drainage resolved?
HRC believes that because this is a crush and reshape, they're not taking any material away. The fact that there is no crown existing on the road right now is part of the underlying issue. But they're going to basically add 3 inches to it, and when they crown that, we will no longer have the issues of the grass being higher than the road. So they believe it'll be fixed, no problem.
What is the expected lifespan of this repavement?
I haven't seen it documented, so I think that ultimately will depend on traffic volumes. I think in the existing case, I would imagine 25 to 30 years, as long as the traffic volumes remain the same.
I'm just wondering if it'll be paid for before the pavement needs...
Oh,
Yeah, by default, because they did not build it to Livingston County Road specs, our policy says it's a 7-year SAD to ensure that the assessment is shorter than the life expectancy of the road.
Livingston County construction specifications, given the amount of, or the number of homes on this road, would have required curb and gutter. So therefore, the homeowners were very adamant that they wanted to keep the cost as economical as they could. So they were made aware of the 7-year versus 10-year as well.
Other questions? Being none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you. Item number 8B is our blight and nuisance ordinance.
I move to approve resolution adopting the alternative blight and nuisance ordinance and repealing ordinance number 49.
Support. Motion by trustee Kalani, second by trustee Harper. Discussion?
Is the alternative where the fireworks is prohibited the weekend before and the weekend after? You presented two.
Yeah, I want to clarify that the
Yeah.
board knows that there are two options there. The alternative is the one where the firework prohibition does not apply to the Friday, Saturday, and Sunday before and after a national holiday, in addition to the day before and after.
So that's the one you made the motion on?
Yes.
Yes.
I have a question.
Yes.
There's several species of weeds and such that are invasive. So we have Phragmites in our community right now, and it's on this list as a blight. So what is the recourse? What's going to be the position of the township when it comes to something like Phragmites? Since it's in here, I just thought I'd ask the question.
It's a very good question. And that's a pretty standard list of noxious weeds that you would find in, I think if actually the state publishes that list. That would be a decision for us to what extent that we would try to address those issues. Again, like a lot of things, this is a tool in the toolbox to deal with those, properties that, sort of grow out of control. But, we, as a policy decision, we'd have to decide, because even some of those Phragmites exist in Ore Creek and over by Springer Field, and there are a number of places, of course, but whether we'd want to try to fight that battle or not.
That's a very good point. And if the state isn't going to take care of their problem, which is almost every, on every state road, every ditch that you see has Phragmites on it. I can't imagine us requiring a property owner to remove Phragmites from private property.
Yeah, you might, it's hard to imagine a scenario where we're kind of forced, or our hand is forced in that issue, but I guess it would be more to deal with just, some sort of maintenance issue that's out of hand, or somehow allowing the flourishment of it, through not just neglect, but some other condition. But if that's, if we don't want that to be in this ordinance, certainly the board has option to take that.
I wasn't suggesting that, I'm just trying to figure,
it's
an ordinance, and we have it, there's a known problem.
And certainly, a number of these species, I'm sure, exist in other places as well.
Well, I don't want to go into it tonight, but I would at some point in the future, if it was okay with the board, just to talk about Phragmites. We don't have it bad in our community right now, but...
What is it? What does it look like?
So on the west side of Ore Creek Bridge, those very large weed...
It's a reed.
It's a reed. They're very tall. They're invasive species. They choke out all the other vegetation.
Nothing else can live there. It's so tight in there. Birds can't live in it. It's just...
They're not the ones who like the brown grass, real tall.
No, that's a tall grass, isn't it?
Well, this stuff
You would have a plume on the top.
There's a brownish,
When you go across right next to Springer Field, on the west side, that whole area's now got Phragmites in it.
How do you get it out?
He's going to pull a Phragmite up.
I'll pull up the aerial.
But if you go down to southeast Michigan now, down in the Lake Erie area, it's overtaking everything. It's in the ditches, it's in all the wetlands. It's a real problem, and it's getting worse here every year. So again, that's kind of going down a different spot. But
this area here on the west side of Hartland, right south of the bridge, you'll see, you can't miss them right now. They're in their peak.
Couldn't you just search Phragmites?
Yeah, I can show you.
I mean, we do, in the metro parks, they have burnings to burn out a lot of these invasive species, and even that isn't that successful. It's got to dig them out.
I think Roundup might be the only way to get rid of it. I'm not sure. But anyway, something for perhaps another, it's probably like 13, 14 feet tall.
Yeah, that's a good picture of them.
Yeah.
That's picture. On my neighbor's property.
The next
We need to find some sort of cattle or something.
Yeah.
Not my property. Could I burn it?
Okay. If there's nothing else on this, Is this a resolution?
Yes.
I think that this is a good improvement over what we've had for many years. It will give us something on the books to, like a mirror, to judge how we conduct ourselves with other people, our neighbors, and what is and isn't considered blight. While I think it's a good improvement, I think the one drawback is that it still comes down a lot of times to subjective decisions, and the only way we're going to be able to benefit from this ordinance revision, I think, is to have very conscientious staff and try to show a lot of consistency when we go to enforcement. And the one thing that I thought of is, are we going to enforce ourselves? Just like this Phragmites thing that was brought up. The township doesn't, we ourselves, the township, we keep all of our properties in good condition and things like that, so we're not contributing to blight, but, the first neighbor that we try to complain to about a wetland that's filling in naturally and it's full of Phragmites, they're going to point to us and say, well, you look at your own property, you're not doing anything about it. So that's the one caution I throw out there, and it boils down to the staff management and the directors and how they're going to try to enforce it. I think it would be helpful that should this be approved, this ordinance and resolution, that there be some type of report in the, and I guess maybe it would be Dave's department, that, how this is being enforced, or so we can try to keep tabs on it as the new policy takes place.
Certainly, points well taken, and I think practically speaking, the ordinance enforcement issues that you currently see in the operational reports won't change. This just gives us better tools to deal with them and to stand in front of a magistrate or whomever with the language necessary to deal with it. Blight is one of those tricky things. It's hard to define. It's kind of I know it when I see it, and yes, it is subjective in that way, and you do have to you end up in the weeds, no pun intended, so to speak, and kind of describing situations that, one thing by itself we would probably all agree is not a blight or health safety issue. It's sort of combination of those things, and you need this type of language to get there. We will certainly keep you updated, and if you hear that we're overstepping our bounds, we will be accountable for that.
And I'll tell you, Matt, working across the hall, I get to hear a lot of Dave's interactions with people, and I just find him to be very fair, consistent. You don't see people leaving angry. He does a wonderful job there with the people at the counter.
Any other comments, questions? Being none, I'll have the clerk please call the roll.
Supervisor Fountain?
Yes.
Clerk Hopkins, yes. Treasurer Horning?
Yes.
Trustee Kalani?
Yes.
Trustee Germain?
Yes.
Trustee Harper?
Yes.
Trustee Petrucci?
Yes.
Resolution carries.
Thank you. Item number 8C is sewer property purchase agreement. Manager Wickman?
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. I did email out late this afternoon literally one word change in the document that had been requested. Otherwise, the purchase agreement that was included in your packet, I did receive confirmation from the prospective buyer that they're in agreement with the full agreement with the terms. We did provide to you an updated analysis to look at the net proceeds that would projected based on the new terms. It is, I fully acknowledge, this is different on two significant fronts from the last time we talked about it, and that was essentially as a result of our sit-down with them last week, and where we brought forth the concerns that the board had and some of the language changes that you wanted to see, and they presented some other concerns that they would like to propose in response to that. The overall impact of that economically is about $120,000 less on the net proceeds, and there would still be net proceeds based on the agreement. The two major items that you'll note, of course, are that the interest to be accrued on the purchase price, the clock for that would not start at the signing of this agreement. It would now be delayed and start at the time of the first closing. And so you have about a year and a half or maybe longer where interest on the purchase price is not accruing, and that accounts for the monetary difference in the net proceeds. And then the second major difference that we did not talk about before is that we previously contemplated that all 490 RUs at the end of the day would be used on this property. At the meeting that Supervisor Fountain and I met with them, they still had some concerns about that and would like the opportunity to talk about that at a later time. Whether or not that is a real concern or something that will come to reality, I think is a fair question. While I think we all acknowledge that using 498 RUs on that property, they definitely have to use it wisely and creatively to get that high. It's not that far-fetched to say that they'll come close to it. Their concern is that if they can't put in uses or appropriate density that fits our approval to use all of those, they'd like, before proceeding forward with closing, like to see if there would be any agreement what to do with the unused RUs. And that'd be open-ended, and it'd be one of those things where if we can't agree to that, that could potentially be a termination of this agreement. What it is they need, they cannot say for sure, because they got to do the market study, they got to figure out what kind of product they're going to put there in the concept plan, and what before trying to project how many RUs they would be talking about. That could certainly be an issue for us. It could be an issue for us right now. At least the way this purchase agreement is written is saying we're basically agreeing to all the other terms but that, and that we'll have an opportunity to talk about that later. And if we can't reach agreement on it then there's no more agreement. There is we didn't talk about with them, but as you recall, the previous landowner had an SAD contract that had a provision for unused RUs, and they exercised that, and we had what started out as 525, we ended up buying back 27 RUs, and they had provision in there for quite a bit more that we previously agreed to. As long as we had a buyer for them, we would take back those RUs. That may be a part of our consideration at a later time, but those are the two major changes.
Didn't they also pledge more additional funds that were non-refundable?
Yeah, that was part of, they heard what the board had to say about concern about tying up the property for as long, or the possibility that the approval process could go on ad nauseum, and, they had agreed to what you asked for, to have a conceptual plan submitted by the 6-month point of the approval period. They felt that was reasonable and they could do that. And they agreed to that if that approval period went past the original 12 months, that they would put up another $50,000 of non-refundable money to keep things going. So that was a part of, I guess, the concession on their side. And there are some smaller language items you saw in there, and I don't know if I necessarily need to highlight them.
If they lose or if we can't come to an agreement with the RAUs, do they lose the first deposit?
Potentially not, because that's only non-refundable after the inspection period of the first 6 months are over. So if they do enough of their homework, market study, come up with a rough conceptual plan that they say, okay, we've got X number of REUs we'd actually like to negotiate about during that first 6 months due diligence period, and we can't reach an agreement and they feel like that, then they could terminate the agreement before that first amount is non-refundable.
So that's just a 6-month period that we're putting at risk?
Yes, for that first $50,000, correct.
I'd like to make a motion to authorize the supervisor to execute the revised purchase agreement to sell the 2 properties on M59. And what date should we list it as, the date of these revisions?
Yeah, I mean...
Today's date?
You're referring to the revised purchase agreement that was published today and distributed today? Yeah, that's...
So the motion would be dated September 2nd.
Second.
Motion by trustee Jermaine, second by treasurer Horning. Other comments, questions?
The thing that you sent out today, but it should say Fenton Road, not just the word Fenton, shouldn't it?
Earlier in the agreement, if you look above in that paragraph, it labels that the Fenton property.
I see, okay.
That gives it an official name.
They did state in our discussions that I asked them what would be the right time for them, and they were looking at about a year and a half. By the time they do their due diligence, get through the planning,
Spring.
it would be spring of 2016. And this fits into their time frame, that the 6 months to a year and a half.
You need to break ground, Bill?
Yes. Engineering, all of the different elements they have to go through, their own due diligence. So, and they're very interested in the back portions of the property, not the front portions. That was one of our concerns. Somebody come in and take the commercial end of it and, the back part. So that was refreshing to hear.
Yeah, they actually think the back portion of the residential is more marketable today than the commercial, opposite of what our concern had been.
Any other questions or comments? Being none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion carries.
Before we move on, I have a question. There was a press release presented at our tables this evening. What's the action for this?
Just wanted to make you aware, we had not had a draft. We were waiting on the representative from the potential buyer to confirm, their content. We should have that tomorrow, and that's when we're looking to release that information.
Sounds good.
Just giving you a heads up, we'd normally do that by email, but this is a fresh draft today.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to board reports. And we start with our first meeting in September. Trustee Jermaine?
No report.
Trustee Petrucci?
No report.
Clerk Hopkins?
No report.
Treasurer Horning?
Nothing.
Trustee Kalani?
No report.
Trustee Harper?
No report.
Well, I'll break the ice. I'll just quickly, James, Dave, and myself visited Merit Energy, the sweetening plant. They gave us a nice tour. And we went through all their checks and balances and all their safety elements. So that was nice of them to offer that to us. It was actually pretty. I learned a lot more than I thought I was going to going through. It's an amazing process that they use that for. And then this afternoon, James, myself, Mike Cunningham, and Brian Jonkier, we talked about the rate study for the sewers. Just had a healthy discussion, and plan on meeting up with their committee this Thursday morning, just to share with them our thoughts as we go forward with the rates. So that was a good meeting today. That's all I have. Manager Wickman?
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. I do have the clipboard. I'll let that make the rounds. We do have Heritage Day, of course, coming up as well, and in addition to our normal staff or Chamber of Commerce or branding type events, if you can make it out for a part of that, that'd be great. We will have a presence down there as usual. We do have the board retreat, as a reminder, next Wednesday, September 10th. That'll be from 12 p.m. to 6 p.m. at the new EMS facility over by the Howell Airport. And I'll send out a reminder with address early next week. We'll have some light snacks there, so if you have any specific dietary requirements or requests, please do let me know. Also wanted to call your attention, we are taking a look at a joint meeting with the Planning Commission shortly thereafter, and that's intentional. As we noted at the last time, there was some thought that maybe that should happen closer to the board retreat. So we're looking at Thursday, September 25th. That's a normally scheduled Planning Commission meeting. If it pleases the board, we'd like to schedule that as a joint session.
Yeah, fire authority meeting,
Is that a date? Or okay. We can, if that date didn't work out for some reason, I guess we'd probably take a look at next meeting, which would be the second Thursday in October. Whatever date that would be. 9th. Would that be a potential date? Any conflicts known on that?
Second Thursday works, not the last Thursday.
Right. So if you can pencil in October 9th, and I'll just...
You'd have a planning commission night then. Or is that why we're doing it then?
Yeah, we're trying to target that.
I know it's looking far ahead, James. On October 7th, our first meeting in October, is there anything major that you know of that
What are they doing?
that's going on?
Planning Commission, George.
October 7th.
I might be out of town. I see. We don't have to talk about it tonight, but...
Yeah, I'll give that some thought.
In our meeting tomorrow, we can talk about it.
Because that's 5 weeks from today, so I don't...
For the booth.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't think of anything off the top of my head. I'm sure we'll have something. I mean, we'll want to start looking at draft of strategic plan following the Dr. Bender session, of course. That's about all I think of
Yeah,
right
I think
now.
I'm also going that night to the Treasurers Conference. I think it's the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th.
For that week?
Joe Petrucci and I we're actually working Heritage Days
Okay.
already for the hero. So I don't know how might be able to put it in an hour.
You can wear your shirts and make your way down every now and then.
All right, let me think about it.
All right.
We're making spaghetti, so everyone's welcome to come enjoy.
So is that, we want to move that? We have 5 Tuesdays this month. If you wanted to bump that up to the 30th of September even, or
Our next board meeting?
the October 7th
October
meeting?
7th.
Versus October 7th?
Yeah.
That would be fine with me. I don't know how... I won't be here. Joe won't.
Joe's gone.
Well, Kathy's going to be gone.
I'll be out of town, too.
Kathy was going to be gone on the 5th.
Are you going all week, or are you?
I'm not-
this
Because I'll be back on
Yeah.
Wednesday. How about moving it to Wednesday?
We'll talk about... Yeah, we'll talk about this at our admin meeting and see if there's some dates that are available. Anything else, James?
Yes, I'm sorry. I had just we talked about the news release, and then, of course, I just wanted to also acknowledge on behalf of staff the project being done quickly on sidewalks in the village, and that went quite well, and I hope everybody has a chance to go down and look at those. Great improvement in the village, so.
And when will we expect the sidewalk ordinance?
It's at my co-mayor's for review right now, so I would expect that.
And you mentioned that you did talk with the schools about the potential of having...
We've planted the seed. We're waiting confirmation from them saying for sure yes.
Okay.
And if that...
On the school side?
Yeah.
Yeah, where all the kids were.
Finishing the loop.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
That's all I had. Happy to answer any other questions the board has.
Looks like there aren't any questions. Let's move on to number 11A. James, would you like to review the residential market analysis?
Sorry, just catching up on my notes here. Hopefully, you had a chance to at least read the executive summary on that. And I think really, for the purpose of review, that's really what I would use as my outline. It really does hit the highlights, I think, well, of what the rest of the content, the methodology, the numbers, the deep dive that you will find in the rest of the report and the appendices talks about. The meat of what comes out of that in the way of, findings or recommendations are that, there's about 500 to 600 new residential units that we can reasonably expect over the next 5 years. And I should clarify something that's not maybe clear that we got through follow-up discussion with the consultant, is that this study, this particular residential market has to do with new developments. It's not the single lot development, the one-off, 4 houses here, that kind of thing. That's a different segment of the market. It's a additional absorption, additional new homes to be expected. This focuses on a specific, residential development offering these types of products, what could reasonably be marketable and absorbed. And so at a pace of about 124 new units a year, you see that that's broken up. A significant portion of that is meeting some rental needs that are under met in the market, and then a cross-section of attached, single-family, detached, low, mid, high-level single-family options. And you get an idea for what they're looking for, the demographic that's looking for, what kind of square footage you're looking for, what kind of price point they're looking for in those. And the deeper dive into the information, will be of greater interest, and I think you would find interesting, is talking about the different demographic groups and what kind of demographic groups can reasonably be predicted to be interested in the Hartland market. And some of it I did find somewhat surprising. And anybody who's, kind of looked at how they do marketing these, or study markets these days, this way that they're sort of categorizing family or market types is quite interesting in describing their living and spending habits and what types of interests they invest in. That has something to do with the type of housing we can expect. Overall, the consultant's view of Hartland as a place to live is elevated over our neighbors, that it is a more desirable place, and the price points are reflected there, that they believe that a higher-end product across all the different types could be justified and absorbed. You will note, something interesting to note would be to look at page 6 in particular, is where they talk about 3 specific areas in the township that they found particularly interested from the outside looking in and looking through the eyes of a potential home buyer in a development in Hartland Township. One of those areas, of course, is the sewer properties that we just approved the purchase agreement on. They were very intrigued by that assembly of land, how many acres were there, what could be there, the conceptual plan of mixed uses and densities that had previously been proposed there, and that sense of place that we talked about tonight. They very much thought there was a good opportunity there. The other 2 areas, one is the Clyde Road interchange, that there is, the proximity to the expressway and accessibility, and kind of a blank canvas offered some things that make that area probably a good place for the next, one of the next phases of development to see. The third thing that we may find interesting, just because I don't think we've talked about it much before, is Dunham Road, just east of Clark here. That because the school is such a central point of our community, and there's an attraction for many of the people who are choosing to move here, that the proximity to the schools, the reasonable proximity to infrastructure, even though it's on a unpaved road, that paving the road to get to paved road would not be difficult to overcome, water and sewer within reachable distance, proximity to schools as well as to M59, that could be a strong place of interest for development. And that's something that would be very interesting to discuss, not only with this board, but also with the Planning Commission, as they now take this information and start to lean into the future land use map and the comprehensive plan, and start to look at, does that land use map contemplate the same things that the market is, and while at the same time protecting our community values, and is there opportunity to make adjustments there? That could be an intriguing conversation, I think. So those are the highlights. Wanted to make that known to you and go over it, and of course would love questions or dialogue on it. And I'm sure that we will kind of refer to this as we continue forward and make decisions, and at next week's board retreat, and There's a lot of things on the horizons where this type of information will come into play.
Will you be distributing this via our website?
It will have a prominent home on the homepage probably next week, and we'll definitely be pushing it out. We'll do a news release on it. Tomorrow we're going to be working on a list of targeted, realtors, residential developers, those who ought to have this information to, obviously grease the skids for interest in our community.
Okay. Will you be forwarding that to Spark as well, then?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. All right. Questions, comments?
Is it something our planning commission should be reviewing?
They'll be looking at it at their next meeting, I believe.
Nothing else? Well, thank you for that update and report. 11B is off-premise signs, nonprofits. We added this at our admin meeting the other day. There's been discussion on nonprofit signage within the ordinance. And one of the signs that we came up with would be like a United Way sign, for instance. And right now, the ordinance does not allow you to do that, correct?
Right.
And we wanted to get a pulse of the board. What type of signs would we consider within the community, and what type of litmus test could we use to allow those type of nonprofit signs?
Talking tipper signs?
Right. Well, in a lot of communities, a United Way sign could be up for months as they're going through their campaign.
I think part of the challenge is that, and not just United Way, but, there could be a nonprofit that doesn't have a physical presence in the township, so no matter what, it's going to be some sort of off-premise sign. Or two, it isn't related to a specific community event that meets that ordinance, special event provision, that we would allow those types of signs up around a specific event. It could be some sort of a larger fundraising or some other messaging, and the question is, what would be the board's intent in this policy? Would it be to make some provision for those, or because we've drawn the line on off-premise signs, we talked about agritourism not too long ago and other things, is this also one of those things where we would have to say no to?
One of the thoughts that we had, like with United Way, is it's a county fundraiser, but a lot of those dollars actually, not the majority by any stretch, but some of those dollars do come back to our community. So our community does benefit by having the United Way in our community.
Even though they don't have a physical location in the township.
So, the Ordinance Review Committee, this is on their list of things, and so we talked about it briefly at one meeting and kind of decided to put it at the end of the list because we hadn't had anybody ask us about this kind of thing in the past. And then shortly thereafter, somebody came and asked about it, so we brought it back up again. So, as James said, it's similar to the discussion we had with the agritourism, just trying to get the board's pulse on if you want us to lean into it. When we started talking about it again, I did ask Dave to research it in other communities to see what they're doing with these types of signs, and he didn't find anybody that's dealing with them in any way, really.
So they're just doing it.
They ignore them, you're saying?
Yeah, I'm saying they don't have any regulations on them.
So they'll know. Or they ignore them or whatever.
Well, I don't think that not saying anything about them allows them. I mean, it doesn't, we don't say anything about them in ours, and they're not allowed by virtue of the regulations that are there about.
What you're saying is the likely scenario is that they turn a blind eye to it. Not
Because I
necessarily in all
see them
cases.
all over.
Right, sure.
Yeah.
And part of the, what the back and forth discussion on it is, there could be potential heartburn over, there are plenty of worthy nonprofits out there that might want that type of signage, and like anything else, is it a slippery slope? And this is just a question really asking the board, its thermometer, is would the board like us to find a way to allow some of this, or are we okay with
I
it?
say yes.
I don't know.
Yeah,
Nonprofits have hard enough time raising money.
Well, and I said, especially if it's like benefiting Hartland people,
it's-
like Habitat Humanity. If they're building a home in Hartland, why not let them?
Yeah, but I mean, you can't regulate it that way either, because there's a lot of organizations that raise money for national causes, or county causes, or Southeast Michigan causes, or state causes. So I wouldn't limit it to that, but I think that we should just find a way to make that work. That's just my opinion.
And that's the type of feedback we're looking for, if that's shared by a...
Keep it simple. I don't know if it's even a problem.
Well, there's the gentleman at the end that approved a lot of signs over the years. What are your thoughts, Matt?
I think it's a good thing, too, as long as they're following the same types of restrictions we put on other businesses. I don't think they should get special favors.
Yeah, well, that encapsulates the whole difficulty about it, because a temporary sign is not something that other businesses can do. So now you're talking about something...
Size and shape. I don't think we should allow them to put up a billboard, where someone else might only get 64 square feet. That's what I'm talking about.
Would it be more appropriate to teach it, to handle it more like a community special event type signage, where we see allow for some of that, versus trying to equate it to some other type of business signage, or just, which in this case there is an actual event, it's more of a nebulous event, fundraising event?
If that's appropriate, then that would be a good way to do it. Not all nonprofits are going to be trying to advertise an event or something.
Sure, right.
Are you saying the kind of the same regulations? I mean, same.
Well, I think you're thinking more of methodology.
Yeah, right. That there has a similar look and feel to it. Are there any opinions to the contrary as far as...
Oh, yeah.
Just trying to figure out the consensus of the board on this.
I think it's slippery to try and figure this out, and every instance is going to be a different desire, I think it's hard to write regulation in that case. I understand the desire to want to be accommodating. I just think it's awful difficult to write regulation on something like this. Probably why a lot of people have just left it alone and, let it happen on its own. Well, certainly, if that's the desire of the board, we'll start working at it.
Do you know, Larry, if there are other communities that have already developed ordinances like this, or are we doing something groundbreaking and earth-shattering?
Well, like I said, we asked Dave to look at, see how anybody else was handling it. He couldn't come up with anybody that had anything written down on it. I mean, I don't know how far he looked, but that's what he reported back to us.
Anything else on that this evening?
Just one comment, that if we don't do something, these signs are still going to show up. So
We do.
either doing nothing means we'll still permit them without just kind of turning a blind eye, and then you can get anything that anyone has the money to build or put up. At least if you've got some framework, even if you're just adopting, the other criteria that's already been set up for businesses, at least they've got a framework to go by.
So if you have an event, how soon can you have that?
Well, a special event you can only have up for, I think it's 14 days before the event. So that would work for United Way, because their drive is going on for months.
But they have lots of ways to advertise it. It's not just putting up a sign.
So would that meet the board's intent to say you can have such a sign, but 14 days is the limitation, or would you imagine it being different than that?
It's like everything else, that's, that one shoe fits everything.
Right, sure.
But I would much rather have them come in, there would be no fee for a non-trade, but at least you have people coming and making an effort, you can explain what you can and can't do.
Sure.
I haven't eaten anything, I'm ready to go home, so wrap this up.
So you'll see that language, and the planning commission will look at it, and the ordinance review committee will look at it.
Okay.
In order to meet that intent.
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll move to adjourn. Support.
Motion by trustee Kalini, second by trustee Harper. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay.